You're welcome to the polling station. This is Johnny Ward over the US border in Canada. And today, most of the show is going to be about Joe Biden's State of the Union address. We'll also get to Rishi Sunak's little reshuffle and what this means for his government going forward into 2023. And we have updated odds on Rishi Sunak's exit year as well. So we'll get to that. Obviously, I think the first thing to say here is just that our thoughts are with the earthquake victims in Syria, Turkey, and beyond. It's been an incredible event, really, that just goes to show how fortunate we are to live normal lives away from this, and we send our condolences to everyone over there. But in the States, we'll start with the State of the Union address, William. Joe Biden, he is the oldest serving president in the US. He's 80. People were wondering, was there enough in this to suggest that he can get to 86? And after a somewhat unsteady start, it looked like he kind of got a bit of his mojo. Heckled Republicans, had a bit of a to and fro with them, and I think the general synopsis is that he did well.
Yeah, I mean, before any of that, completely agree with your comments on those affected in Turkey and Syria. Would very much recommend seeing if there are any good donation charities. There are people on the ground doing amazing work. And I think we all thank them, and we should all be so lucky that people out there are getting help and support from not only NGOs, but also governments. Relating to Joe Biden's speech yesterday, I thought he had a good State of the Union address. I thought the overall tone of it was positive. It was confident. The getting involved with the Republicans and bartering was something he was quite prepared for. Indeed, he appeared to encourage it a little bit. And I thought he was honestly, he was quite comfortable. He was quite comfortable. I thought he was on the front foot. And I think it's a good reflection on where he is now compared to where he was at the start of his presidency, just in the sense that he's got in, and I think he's achieved more than most people ever thought he would. And I think by quite a long way. And now he is able to really back himself up when he's pulled up on the stump on it. I mean, listen, there'll be obvious challenges ahead, but overall, I think he's had a pretty good outing.
Yeah, of course, Bono was among the audience, Paul, which he may or may not be a good kind of exponent of aging gracefully and doing your job as well as ever. But Joe Biden, a lot of Democrats are clearly worried that he's too old to go for another term at 82. You have definitely been on the other side.
His age is a negative. It's the negative, right? And I don't say that in any sense as a statement on him. I think he's highly effective, and I think he's probably the best president of my lifetime, probably the best since Roosevelt. But I understand that in today's world, image is everything, and so much of a presidential election is defined around the optics of your opponent. So if he's up against Trump, this is not a problem at all because he's aging better than Trump. But if he's up against Ron DeSantis, 35 years younger, then there is an optical issue, definitely. I understand that. But in the other side to that is, who would the Democrats put up that would do better than Biden? This is very, very questionable. I thought, I mean, to me, that speech, I've been watching Joe Biden solidly since 2008 when he ran for the presidency and ended up as vice president. I've seen him on the stump hundreds of times. And it was that. He just gave his usual stump speech. That's what Biden does. He's on the side of the worker, the consumer, the little guy, the building up, restoring the middle class, right? Standing up to the billionaires, standing up to the ultra capitalists, so to speak, all of that, right? That's always been Joe Biden's mantra, right? I'm pretty sure that's why Obama picked him, because it plays well in the Midwest and the Rust Belt. And I think that's effective. And I think that one of the things that the Democrats have lost their way on over the years, the left doesn't play the game as effectively as the right. And what Biden does is he knows that if politics is about bread and butter issues, if it's about who's on the side of Social Security and Medicaid, who's going to invest in your community, who's going to protect your job, etc., the Democrats are on a winner. But the minute they start straining at the culture wars, they're in trouble. Even if the majority are on their side, they have a way, the way that those arguments play out and the way they play out geographically in swing states, it hurts them. So Biden's sort of strategy since he took over was, look, Everyone knows my principles. Everyone knows my principles on race, on social justice, on equality. They're there. But I'm going to avoid those cultural landmines, and I'm just going to talk about the economy. I'm going to talk about jobs and my mantra, which is popular. And I think as long as he continues to do that, it's very, very hard for the Republicans to get heard. And I thought the way that he called them out over the debt ceiling was quite brilliant. That was quite brilliant. Saying, you know, I'm not saying all of you think that. I don't even think a significant minority of you think that. But we know who those guys are, and they were shouting and screaming at him as he said it. And that's a hell of a strong message for the Democrats moving forward. This party never get anything done, obstruct everything, and their leadership is held over a barrel by a bunch of lunatics.
It's interesting what he says there, William, in the sense of where the Democrats lie and why Biden has been popular. Because you look at somebody like AOC as a potential future president, and you can almost envisage the issues that Paul talks about there. America is a very divided place.
It is. I think America politically is divided. I think there are still some key issues, and Paul touched on them there, where you can get what you'd call broad bipartisan support for them. Stuff that would get maybe in the 55 to 60 and above percentage support range when you ask everybody. Let's not also forget independence as well, important in this conversation too, especially when it comes down to who the nominee is, although we're looking a bit further with that. But yeah, Biden and his White House team have been very good at communicating what they're doing, but also picking the fight as well. You know, they are not whimpering away when they get hit with these criticisms, whether they're good faith or bad faith. A lot of them have been bad faith. And it's interesting because Eugene Robinson from the Washington Post yesterday, in the top line of his column, said, there are times where Biden has looked and acted his age. Yesterday was not one of those nights. And I think it serves as a reminder, and to people who might sort of worry about what a second campaign or whatever would do to him, which I think is very valid worry, and don't get me wrong, that he's not washed just yet. I don't think it's a wise strategy if you're looking at this as a betting race or contest to start counting him out because you think by that time he'll be too old. You got to look with your eyes and ears. And yesterday, he looked in pretty fine form. And through more of his presidency, actually, he's been pretty combative. We've seen a lot of the retail politics that he's very good at. So I think it was positive for his backers. If you're looking at it in a purely, what does this mean for me in my bets position? Should you be a Biden backer?
He's 4-7 to get the nomination, Paul. I guess the problem is if you think, I mean, aging is aging. We can talk about it now, but you know, even between now and the election is quite a long time for an extremely busy man in his 80s, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. But it's 7-1 bar, and you're looking at if he doesn't get the nomination, who does?
Well, first of all, on the 4-7, I mean, I laid back all my position at 4-7 the other week. Not because I don't think he'll get it, because I thought the market would drift after the documents thing, and because, precisely as you say, so it's just a long wait, right? There's a lot can happen. There's a lot. When you're already in a winning position, I just thought it's wise to take. But I actually think 4-7 does massively understate the chance of him being the nominee, because just think about it logically. He clearly has more to do, right? That's his message.
He referenced that several times. It's like, you know, and that was the clear implication. I'm going to run again. You did mention the documents and also like the issue of his son Hunter, which the Republicans are going to bring up time again. How much of a worry are both the documents and that?
Well, Hunter Biden thing, I don't think is that important. I think, look, is it really news to people that the family members of famous politicians look to cash in on that, right?
Famous people in general.
Yeah, famous people in general. He wasn't a government official. And really, if the Republicans want to go down that road, we're going to start talking about Jared Kushner, and we're going to start talking about Trump organisation. So I'm not sure how effective that is. The documents, let's wait and see. That really is a known unknown, isn't it? Let's see what the special prosecutor comes up with. I think Trump's in major trouble with that, and we will see what happens with Biden and Pence. Again, it's a reason to not want to be holding an odds-on bet all of that time, right? Because it only needs one bombshell story, and the market might go crazy. Now, if you were looking for an alternative, well, again, thinking of the process, I think he's definitely going to declare, right? It's not in his interest to hang on because he'll be a lame duck. So if the nomination is to become competitive, it won't be for a while, and it won't be after loads of people have been building campaigns. So Kamala Harris goes into that a really, really strong favourite, in my opinion. You know, I wouldn't deter people from holding on to Harris as a bet now. Not least also because you've also got to spell up to the general election, which is when the conspiracy theories go mad, when it will be Biden and Harris on the ticket, and all it needs is some stupid internet story that, oh no, like Biden's collapsed and he's going to die like Hillary Clinton in 2016, and Kamala Harris's price is going to crash. So it'll probably stay quite low anyway. Beyond that, if there was an open primary, I don't think there will be, but if there was, the person I would back is Gretchen Whitmer, who I think I mentioned on this about a year ago at 200 and something to 1. But I mean, I don't think she'll run, so I don't think there'll be a vacancy, but she's definitely a future presidential candidate.
William, was there any sort of takeouts for the Republican Party to be happy about from the speech, or are they just, this grossly divided party that are essentially looking to find a scapegoat in Biden? Where do you see it now with regard to 11-8 Trump, 7-4 DeSantis for the nomination?
I don't think there was too much positives from yesterday. I have to admit I didn't get the chance to watch Sarah Sanders' response. Although usually, I should add, the response doesn't get half as much airtime as the actual State of the Union does. It's just a presidency thing. If you have the presidency, you make the actual address, you get more of that attention anyway. It's really more of a focused at the party thing. Regarding how I see that betting, and how I see the market, I think it's pretty fair at the moment. I know Trump's got lots of troubles. I just feel like DeSantis is the obvious one to oppose him with. The only thing is with DeSantis is he's probably got more time than these conversations make it seem, in terms of, does he want to run? He doesn't really have to rush into it, I don't think, to do that. Trump, yes, is sort of already campaigning, but he's always been campaigning. I don't think him deciding to do it in a month or 2 or even 3 or 4 is going to make that much difference. I'd say it might still be worth thinking about a possible outsider as a back to lay thing, and thinking about who might fancy a chance at going for the GP nomination in order to give themselves more political profile, laying down the ground for a future presidential bid. And I think there is some value there. I just don't know where exactly. We discussed last week about Nikki Haley and sort of the poor numbers she has considering her profile. Does that leave more space for somebody else, particularly if DeSantis hasn't declared yet? I think so, but I don't know who, unfortunately.
Just finally, you can give the final word on it, Paul. You got to be fairly happy as a Democrat voter at the moment, and notwithstanding the fact that I think between now and the election, the Republicans can completely self-destruct as well.
Yes, I do. I think that's right. And we saw that in the midterms. I mean, the only way of interpreting those midterm results was an absolutely terrible result for the Republicans and for the Trump Republicans, for the MAGA Republicans. The fact that the Democrat vote didn't turn out as one would expect it not to in a midterm, and they still didn't have a bad night, really says a lot about where independents are going. And what are the Republicans going to do for these last 2 years? They're going to be controlling the House, pushing Hunter Biden investigations, trying to impeach Biden over nothing and failing. It's not going to look good. Look, let's get to this primary. So we'll mention some outsiders. There's a lot of angles to this Republican primary. First of all, DeSantis is really weak on Betfair at the moment. He's like 4.8 from like 3.0. Maybe there is something that he isn't running. I mean, he hasn't put down a camp in Iowa yet or anything like that, as candidates normally do. And maybe he is thinking 2028. Now, if he is, and it's Trump versus the rest, right? Well, Trump's a disaster. How is he going to campaign by being asked every single day, will you accept the election result if you lose? will you tell your supporters not to go and burn down the Capitol? And that's just going to be constant.
I think just on that as well, sorry to interrupt, Paul, I think Trump turned 77 this year, and I think there have been signs that even whatever his brand of nonsense is, it has actually been on the wane in recent years.
I completely agree. Completely agree. I really wonder how much it sells. I know that the election denial things he planned for the midterms didn't pan out. No one turned up at these protests in a lot of places. So, yeah, I do think it's finished. But so let's say it is, though, to say it doesn't run. Let's have that scenario. Trump is a favourite. It'll be, 4-1 or something in that. Well, there is an opening. And one guy I've got my eye on at silly prices on Betfair anyway, Brian Kemp, the Georgia governor, who is a far-right politician, just like DeSantis, right? Who absolutely fits the MAGA brand, but has stood up to Trump consistently, right? Over election denial. Trump endorsed his opponent in Georgia and he just blew him away and then won very competitively in a swing state. So if Kemp wanted it, this is the time to do it. And he's a silly price. And I think he's probably got more chance than some of these other names, like these sort of establishment names that come up, like Haley and Mike Pompeo.
Yeah, William, I think he actually falls into the others on request here.
Yes, the others on request. Just to go through a couple of the outsiders got on market. Well, I say outsiders, basically those who aren't in the top three: Trump, DeSantis, Haley. We've got Youngkin and Pence at 20s, Pompeo at 33s, Tim Scott at 33s. Then you're sort of really into the weeds of the name. We got Candace Owens, who's like the biggest, I don't want to say celebrity. So I will say media personality at 66 is Lauren Christie, Jim Jordan, Josh Hawley, Christy Noam. Then you've got Cruz, Carlson, Crenshaw. Crenshaw's 80s, Jared Kushner's 80s, Rubio's 80s, Romney's 80s, along with Tom Cotton. And then it's 100s for your Devin Nunes and your Donald Trump Jr.'s and your Ivanka Trumps and your Susan Collins and very hilariously your Kanye West, which I'm sure is a Rick left in before he decided to go. There isn't really a word for how crazy he decided to go. So yeah, it really has a feel of a very much anyone's race, depending on what happens, because there's definitely a gap, and I agree with Paul. I think there's definitely a gap for a more traditional GOP candidate to go and be the establishment face against Trump, particularly if enough of the higher ranking GOP officials think we cannot have this guy run again and be asked those questions and refuse to ask those questions in the affirmative all the way in the lead up against Biden and have more 4 years of Biden. So yeah, I think it's open. I think that's very much subject to change.
Just moving on to Britain. So Zelensky's in the UK, which will probably give a little bit of a popularity bump to Rishi Sunak. And I think it was fairly well heralded here at a time when it was actually a very backable thing that how he would get sacked, which he was. Rishi Sunak's had a minor sort of cabinet reshuffle since. Is he in a better place now, Paul, than let's say he was on January 1st?
Rishi Sunak? No.
Yes. No.
He's it gets worse by the day. Whilst thinking it's just unthinkable that they would have a third leadership contest this year, I think there's a good chance. I mean, he's already got a lower approval rating than Boris Johnson ever had. I mean, think about that. That's a shocker. That's at the end of a honeymoon period, right? There's no good news on the horizon. They're talking about energy bills going up 40% in April. You've got one scandal after another hitting them. And then critically, I think what we're in now is we're in this mid-1990s situation where the media, or at least the sort of client journalists in the media who just want to back the winning side and the proprietors who just want to back the winning side, are now looking at this and going, well, they've got no chance, right? We have to be on side here and we don't want to be. And so they're willing to take shots at things. I mean, there's a Harvey scandal was a classic case in point. Has been around for a long time, that story. And yet all of a sudden, the Sun decided to ramp it up and it removed him. Right. So I think that we are in that situation. You've also got a major grassroots conservative revolt, I suspect, right? That's everything I hear about in various associations. They're struggling to find members who will run, who will campaign. And that's going to make the local elections a complete disaster. And, you know, Boris Johnson hasn't gone away. His machine hasn't gone away. He's got this Conservative Post website that seems to work for him on his behalf. Nadine Dorris got a TV show. And I just don't see life getting any better for Sunak, no.
So then you would have thought the 7-2 that he's replaced as leader in 2023 is value.
It's a matter of timing. I just have a feeling that will drift out quite a bit, because you remember the Boris markets. He was on the edge for months, right? And there was an absolute mountain of stuff waiting for him. And yet, every time there was a flashpoint, it was shortened up to 2-1, 6-4. And then 24 hours later, it was drifting again, as if everything's over now. So I think we'll get bigger than that. But at the same time, I mean, whereas I wouldn't have given that a prayer, if you'd asked me in November, when he just took over, I thought, no, that's definitely it. They'll go with Sunak now, and they will keep him till the election and see what happens. But I don't think so now. I don't think they'll go such a loser who the members don't like.
What have you made of the reshuffle, creating new ministries? You see Shap's getting this new role, energy security and net zero, which, you know, all sounds very good, William.
Yeah, I think the idea of the reshuffle was to give sort of more prominence to the things that Sunak ostensibly cares about, and to give that sort of optical feel, basically. Look, we're giving a guy net zero as a job. Look, we're thinking about digital security. We're thinking about energy security. These are all things that you care about, right? So we care about them too. And in principle, I guess I see the logic in that. The only thing I'd say about it is, I think for all that to work, you get the results further down the road, much further down the road than you do now. You know, changing these departments, etc. Sorry to get a bit wonky here, but it takes time. It costs a lot of money, about 20 to 25 million, I think, per department. Don't take that to the grave, but it's a lot of money to do that. And also you can sometimes end up with people who've got entirely new briefs order to learn, and you don't get the instant results that you want. I think it's more future planning, and I don't think it's going to make a particular difference to Sunak's political fortunes, most of which are basically centered around the fact that public services in this country are performing extremely poorly, and save some sort of miracle, which only His Majesty's government can implement, that's going to remain the case for the foreseeable future. I think the core of Sunak's polling and his fortunes and his political position is already set in. And I think for that to change, something very big needs to happen. Regarding him being under pressure as party leader, I think he'll get collectively more pressure, but the threshold for actually pushing him out has got to be so high. I actually wonder just a bit if the answer for the CDO types of groups in the Tory party is somebody with Boris's blessing who's not Johnson. I don't know why Johnson would want the job, right? Because he's making massive amounts of money that he can't as PM, that ostensibly he needs if Richard Sharp and Sam Blythe are to be believed. He doesn't have the discipline. He doesn't have this discipline to be prime minister. So how would he have the discipline to lead him in opposition? I don't think he wants that fight. I think his best days politically are long behind him anyway. And then you'd have the issue of how can you get a government to serve him? You know, it's all well and good getting on the ballot and having 100 MPs back or whatever. But have we forgotten it's less than like a year when the BBC and Sky News had to run updated live graphic tickers showing how many people had resigned because that many ministers were posting resignation letters. You couldn't keep up unless you had a tracker. Yeah. I think it was like 60 to 70 in the end. I don't know that he's convincing, like, say, 35 people serve under me. I don't know that he's doing that. So I'm still opposed to that political comeback at the moment.
If we fast forward to the next election, Conservatives' overall majority is 8-1. I think we can safely say that is not going to happen. That leaves Labour at 4-6, Paul, and no overall majority at 13-8. So there has to be value here.
You know, I can't bring myself to say it. I can't bring myself to say that Labour will get a majority because there are firstly, to gain the number of seats they need to gain to win an overall majority is an enormous task in any election, right? You're up against incumbents who might be quite popular. There's going to be boundary changes, etc. Secondly, I don't believe that Labour's vote will be efficiently distributed. I think they will.
How strong is Labour actually in general?
Well, it's not. It's not strong. They're the alternative. They're the alternative to the worst government we've ever had, right? And all Farmer's got to do is stand up straight, right? That's how they've got to 50% in the polls. So you have that, but you also have this reality of recent years, which is that not just in Britain, but here it manifests itself like this, particularly that Labour's voters are overwhelmingly younger, graduates, socially liberal, mixed race, diverse, right? Whereas the Conservative vote is older, whiter, largely didn't go to university, right? And when you distribute that around the country, it means Labour will always pile up thousands and thousands of unnecessary votes to win city constituencies.
Mm.
And so let's say we had a general election and the polls were like they are now. Well, every seat in London would probably go Labour, and the majorities in places like, Islington and, East London, that they would absolutely be off the scale. Likewise, Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle, etc. Whether that is the case in Swindon, which is the ultimate marginal, that's just to win most seats. Once you get into winning a majority, they're having to win places like Basingstoke. They're having to win places in the south that they've never, ever won, where there is no substantial local Labour Party. And what I think a problem that the opposition might have here is that the sensible thing to do strategically is for Labour and Liberal Democrats to, behind the scenes, carve all this up between them and say, we're going for these ones and you're going for these ones. Because the polls are so one-sided at the moment and the Lib Dems are underperforming because it's mid-term, it's very hard for the Lib Dems to make a case that they should be the party in a lot of seats. But there are a lot of seats where they've got far better chance of beating the Tories than Labour have. We saw in the by-elections, for instance.
Yeah, I've often found that electoral pact stuff is just so fraught for everyone involved in terms of the complexities of a leader kind of basically pissing off one of his runners and saying, well, you're not going to win, so I'm just going to give that to another party. And Northern Ireland actually, is very interested at the moment. A case being made that we should have had an SDLP sort of unionist alliance, UUP alliance rather, on certain issues, and both parties are struggling at the moment. Anyway, we've only a couple of minutes left. William, last word to you.
Okay, so if you gave me, let's say, basically, if you gave me a 5-unit stake and said you had to pick a Labour majority or hung Parliament, I'd pick a Labour majority because I think it's the more likely and I think it's the better the prices. There's a long way to go still. There are some things that Keir Starmer himself and Labour will have to confront. They'll need to be a bit bolder in a couple of areas. They'll need to have more of a plan and some answers to the questions of, yeah, sure, the Tories have screwed this up, but what would you specifically, Mr. Starmer or Miss Nandy, what would do about it, etc. I think they're still well placed for majority because of two things. First of all, the underlying government polling issues, the underlying Tory party image, and the fact Sunak is being dragged down with it rather than vice versa, all in their favour. Regarding the difficulty of the task, it can't be understated, absolutely not. But I think there's two things in their favour. Number one, I think that Labour HQ are not going to go and run interference in Lib Dem areas. I think they're more than smart enough to know where to fight those battles and vice versa. And also, Rishi Sunak has two heirs of the Conservative Party who are both being upset. He's got this southern wall, he's got southern wall, then he's also got his red wall. I don't think he can fix both before next election.
That was the polling station. As we mentioned at the outset, do check out the various organs that you can use to give some money to those people fighting on the ground in Syria and Turkey in light of the earthquake. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.